Imagine waking up every day feeling as though the weight of the world is pressing down on you, not just emotionally, but physically. At 400 pounds, that's exactly how I felt, burdened, exhausted, and utterly defeated. The simple act of getting out of bed felt like a monumental task, one that drained me before the day had even begun. Every step felt like a reminder of how far I'd fallen, how lost I'd become. But somewhere deep within me, buried under layers of doubt and fear, there was a voice, a faint, almost inaudible whisper that refused to be silenced. It said, "This isn't how your story ends." And against all odds, I began to listen. At my lowest, I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs without feeling winded, my chest tightening as if I'd just run a marathon. My kids would ask me to play and I'd have to say no, embarrassed by my inability to keep up. They deserved more from me, and I knew it. But the real weight wasn't just on my body, it was in my mind. Anxiety, depression, self-loathing. These were my constant companions. Every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see a person who was overweight. I saw someone who had given up. I saw failure. And that, more than anything, was what hurt the most. Society didn't make it any easier. People would stare, some would whisper behind my back, and others wouldn't even bother to hide their disdain. Comments like, "He'll never change," or "He's too far gone," echoed around me, reinforcing the narrative that I was destined for a life trapped in this body, trapped in this mindset. I felt like I was sinking into a hole I could never crawl out of. The deeper I went, the harder it was to even imagine a way out. Then came a moment, a seemingly small but pivotal moment, that changed everything. One day, after a particularly rough evening filled with self-pity and frustration, I stumbled upon a video about an Ironman race. For those who don't know, an Ironman is one of the toughest endurance races on the planet. It includes a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2-mile marathon, all in one day. It's a feat that challenges even the fittest of athletes. It was ridiculous to think that someone like me, 400 pounds, barely able to walk upstairs, could ever dream of completing something like that. And yet, as I watched these athletes push their limits, something stirred inside me. The whisper returned, stronger this time. Why not you? At first I laughed at the idea, but over the next few days the thought wouldn't leave me. Completing an Ironman seemed impossible, but maybe that's exactly why it was the perfect goal. If I could do that, I could do anything. So I made a decision. By 2024, I would become an Ironman. The journey didn't start with a bang. There was no dramatic transformation overnight. It began with the tiniest of steps, literal steps. I remember my first walk around the block. It took everything I had. My lungs burned, my legs ached, and my mind screamed at me to quit. But I kept going, one foot in front of the other. Those first few weeks were brutal. Every small change in my diet felt like torture. Every attempt at exercise left me feeling more exhausted than the last. But deep down, I knew that this discomfort was a sign of growth. I was planting seeds of change, even if I couldn't see it yet. I had setbacks, of course. There were days when I binged on food, days when I skipped workouts, days when I questioned whether any of this was worth it. But every time I fell, I got back up, and each time I rose a little stronger, a little more determined. As weeks turned into months, I began to see progress. I was shedding pounds, not just from my body, but from my mind. The weight of self-doubt, the constant fear of failure, was starting to lift. I began to believe in myself again, something I hadn't done in years. Pushing limits. My training evolved slowly. At first I could barely jog for more than a minute without feeling like my heart would explode, but I stuck with it. Jogging turned into running, running turned into cycling. Eventually I found myself in the pool, learning to swim again after years of neglecting my body. The road wasn't easy. There were injuries, days of extreme fatigue, and moments when the mental battle felt more overwhelming than the physical one. But every time I wanted to quit, I reminded myself why I started. I wasn't just doing this for me, I was doing it for my kids, to be the father they deserved. I was doing it to prove to myself and to the world that I was more than what they saw. One of the hardest days came about halfway through my training. I had signed up for a smaller triathlon to prepare for the Ironman. It was a test to see how far I had come. But halfway through the bike ride, I hit a wall. My legs felt like they were made of lead, my lungs were on fire, and the voice of doubt came roaring back. You can't do this, you'll never finish. For a moment I believed it. I slowed down, ready to quit. But then, out of nowhere, I remembered something I'd heard. The body achieves what the mind believes, and at that moment, I chose to believe. I finished that race. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but I crossed that finish line, and with every pedal, every stride, I proved to myself that I could endure, I could overcome. The real turning point came on a quiet morning, months into my training. I was on a long bike ride, the kind that used to terrify me. But this time, something was different. The pain that had once been unbearable was now just part of the journey. The hills that used to defeat me were now challenges I welcomed. As I pedaled through the rising sun, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. In that moment, I knew. I knew that the Ironman was no longer a dream, it was my destiny. Now, as 2024 approaches, I look back on how far I've come. I'm not the same person I was when I started this journey. I've lost more than just weight. I've shed the limitations I once placed on myself. I've discovered strength I never knew I had. There's still work to be done. The Ironman is a beast of a race, and I know the final stretch will push me to my limits. But I'm ready. Every step, every mile, every drop of sweat has brought me closer to this moment. I've learned that life is not about the weight you carry, but the strength with which you carry it. I've learned that no goal is too big, no dream too impossible, if you're willing to fight for it. Yes, it was not easy, but attainable as long as you put your mind to it. The journey was tough. Through the help of will, sheer determination, persistence, and nutrition, I was able to achieve the impossible. Below the video, I will leave you everything I used and took during my journey that helped me achieve this impossible goal. It is simply like a snowball effect. The more results I saw, the more determination and will I have to complete this journey. To anyone out there struggling with their own journey, whether it's weight loss, fitness, or something entirely different, I want you to know this: you are not alone. Your journey is yours, and only you can decide where it takes you. Don't be afraid to dream big. Don't be afraid to fail. Every setback is just a setup for a comeback. If I can go from 400 pounds to becoming an Ironman, then there's no limit to what you can achieve. So take that first step, no matter how small it seems. Keep going, even when it feels impossible. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that the impossible was just the beginning. Let's inspire each other, lift each other up, and prove that together, we can achieve the extraordinary. Let's do this.